Princess Elena stood at the grand marble balcony of Aldoria Palace, her emerald gown flowing like water in the evening breeze. The setting sun painted the royal gardens below in shades of gold and crimson, but her heart felt nothing but cold darkness. After 12 years of marriage to Prince Alexander, heir to the throne of Aldoria, she was about to make the most difficult decision of her life. The diagnosis had come 3 weeks ago. The royal physicians had delivered the news with heavy hearts and bowed heads. Stage 4 cancer, they said. 6 months, maybe less. Elena had listened to their words as if they were speaking about someone else, someone far away. But the pain that followed made everything terrifyingly real. She had not told Alexander immediately. How could she? He was already carrying the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders. His father, King Marcus, had been growing weaker by the day, and the responsibilities of ruling were slowly shifting to Alexander's capable but burdened hands. The last thing he needed was to know that his beloved wife was dying. Elena touched the diamond necklace at her throat, the one Alexander had given her on their first anniversary. She remembered how his eyes had sparkled with joy when he placed it around her neck, whispering promises of forever. Forever had seemed so possible then, so within reach. The palace doors behind her opened with a soft creak. She did not need to turn around to know it was Alexander. After all these years, she could recognize his footsteps, the way he breathed, even the particular scent of his cologne mixing with the evening air. "You missed dinner again," he said gently, coming to stand beside her. His voice carried that familiar note of concern that had become more frequent in recent weeks. "Mrs. Henderson prepared your favorite roast lamb." Elena smiled, though it felt like breaking glass. "I was not very hungry tonight." Alexander studied her profile in the dying light. Even after 12 years, she still took his breath away. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant twist, revealing the graceful curve of her neck. But something was different. There was a fragility about her that had not been there before, a sadness in her green eyes that made his chest tighten with worry. "Elena, you have been distant lately. Have I done something wrong?" His voice was soft, vulnerable in a way that few people ever heard. In public, Prince Alexander was commanding, confident, every inch the future king. But here, with Elena, he was simply a man who loved his wife more than life itself. She finally turned to face him, memorizing every detail of his face. The strong jawline inherited from his father, the kind brown eyes that had first captured her heart at a charity gala 13 years ago, the small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident. She wanted to remember everything. "You have done nothing wrong, my love. You are perfect as always." She reached up to touch his cheek, and he leaned into her palm like a child seeking comfort. "Then what is it? Talk to me." Elena felt the words building in her throat like a dam about to burst. She had practiced this conversation 100 times in her mind. But now, facing Alexander in the golden light of sunset, she could barely breathe. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Before she could continue, the sound of sharp heels on marble echoed from inside the palace. Queen Consort Victoria appeared in the doorway, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. Alexander's stepmother had married King Marcus 5 years ago, bringing with her an icy elegance that had never quite warmed to Elena's presence. "Alexander, darling," Victoria called out, her voice carrying that particular tone of authority that brooked no argument. "Your father wishes to see you in his study. Apparently there are some urgent matters regarding the trade negotiations with Valeria." Alexander sighed, the weight of duty settling on his shoulders once again. "Can it not wait until morning?" "I am afraid not." "You know how your father gets when matters of state are delayed." Victoria's pale blue eyes flicked to Elena with barely concealed disapproval. I am sure Elena understands the importance of royal responsibilities. Elena forced a smile. Of course. Go to your father, Alexander. What I have to say can wait. But even as she spoke the words, Elena knew that time was the one luxury she no longer possessed. Every day was precious now, every moment a gift she could not afford to waste. Yet watching Alexander's face, seeing the conflict between love and duty that had defined their entire marriage, she could not bring herself to add to his burdens. Alexander hesitated, his hand finding Elena's. Are you certain? You seemed like you had something important to share. It can wait, Elena repeated, though her heart was screaming the opposite. He squeezed her hand gently, then leaned down to kiss her forehead. I will be back as soon as possible. Do not wait up for me if you are tired. As Alexander disappeared into the palace with Victoria, Elena noticed the small, satisfied smile that played at the corners of her stepmother-in-law's lips. Victoria had always been skilled at pulling Alexander away at crucial moments, as if she possessed some sixth sense for interrupting intimate conversations between husband and wife. Elena remained on the balcony long after the sun had set, the cool night air raising goosebumps on her arms. The palace gardens below were now shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the soft glow of lanterns along the winding paths. She thought about the life she was about to leave behind, the dreams that would remain unfulfilled, the love that would soon become just a memory. She thought about the child she and Alexander had lost 3 years ago, a miscarriage that had shattered both their hearts. They had planned to try again, to fill the palace with the sound of children's laughter. Now that dream would die with her. Most of all, she thought about Alexander and how this news would destroy him. He was a strong man, but his love for her was both his greatest strength and his most vulnerable weakness. How could she tell him that their forever was about to end? The night stretched on, and Elena made her decision. She would tell him tomorrow, in the morning light, when hope seemed possible again. She would find the words to explain that she loved him too much to fight a battle she could not win, that she wanted to spend her remaining days creating beautiful memories instead of watching him watch her fade away. But first, she had to survive tonight, and the weight of carrying this secret alone felt heavier than the crown jewels themselves. Inside the palace, Alexander sat across from his father's mahogany desk, trying to focus on trade agreements and diplomatic protocols. But his mind kept wandering to Elena on the balcony, to the sadness in her eyes, to the feeling that something fundamental was shifting in his world. He had no idea that his wife was planning a farewell that would change everything, or that time was already slipping through their fingers like sand in an hourglass. All he knew was that he loved her more than the kingdom he was destined to inherit, and that thought both comforted and terrified him in ways he could not yet understand. The morning arrived gray and somber, matching Elena's mood as she stood before her bedroom mirror. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, evidence of another sleepless night. She had heard Alexander return to their chambers near midnight, his careful footsteps trying not to wake her. He had stood by the bed for several minutes, probably watching her pretend to sleep, before finally sliding in beside her. Elena applied concealer under her eyes, rouge to her pale cheeks, and lipstick to bring color back to her lips. The woman looking back at her appeared almost normal, almost healthy. Almost like the princess everyone expected to see. A soft knock interrupted her routine. "Come in," she called, expecting her lady-in-waiting, Margaret. Instead, Alexander stepped through the door, already dressed in his formal navy uniform for the morning's ceremonial duties. He looked tired but handsome, his dark hair slightly tousled despite his best efforts to tame it. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, crossing the room to wrap his arms around her from behind. In the mirror, they looked like the perfect royal couple, the fairy tale everyone believed they were living. "Good morning," Elena whispered, leaning back against his chest. She could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, strong and reassuring. How many more mornings would they have like this? "About last night," Alexander began, his voice uncertain. "I felt terrible leaving you on the balcony. You seemed like you needed to talk about something important." Elena's reflection met his eyes in the mirror. This was her chance. The moment she had been rehearsing since dawn. But looking at his hopeful, loving face, the words stuck in her throat like thorns. "I wanted to discuss our upcoming anniversary," she said instead, the lie coming easier than she had expected. "It will be our 13th in 2 months. I thought perhaps we could take a trip, just the two of us, somewhere private, away from the palace." Alexander's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "That sounds wonderful. Where were you thinking?" "The cottage in Scotland, where we spent our honeymoon." Elena had thought about this carefully. If she was going to have a final trip with Alexander, she wanted it to be somewhere that held their happiest memories. "Perfect. I will speak with my father today about clearing my schedule." Alexander kissed the top of her head, and Elena closed her eyes, trying to memorize the sensation. "I have been thinking we both need some time away from all this responsibility." A sharp rap on the door interrupted them. Without waiting for permission, Queen Consort Victoria entered, her silver morning dress impeccable despite the early hour. "Alexander, your presence is required in the throne room. The Valyrian ambassadors have arrived earlier than expected." Victoria's eyes swept over Elena with barely concealed disapproval. "And Elena, dear, you look rather pale this morning. Perhaps you should consider staying in bed today." Elena stiffened at the dismissive tone, but Alexander stepped protectively closer to his wife. "Elena looks perfectly fine to me, Victoria, and the ambassadors can wait 10 minutes while I finish speaking with my wife." Victoria's smile was sharp as winter frost. "I am afraid they cannot. Your father specifically requested your immediate presence. You know how he values punctuality in diplomatic matters." Alexander's jaw tightened with frustration, but Elena could see the familiar resignation settling over his features. Duty always came first in the royal family, even before love. "Go," Elena said quietly, touching his arm. "We can continue this conversation later." "Are you certain?" "I am certain." After Alexander left, Victoria remained in the doorway, her pale eyes studying Elena with an intensity that made the princess uncomfortable. "You know," Victoria said, stepping fully into the room and closing the door behind her, "I have been observing you lately, Elena. There is something different about you." Elena's hand automatically went to her throat, a nervous gesture she had developed in recent weeks. "I am not sure what you mean." "Oh, I think you do." Victoria moved closer, her heels clicking on the polished floor. "You have the look of someone carrying a secret, a heavy one by the shadows under your eyes." "I am simply tired. The social season has been particularly demanding this year." Victoria's laugh was cold and musical. "Please, dear, I am not a fool. I have lived in royal circles long enough to recognize when someone is hiding something significant." She paused directly in front of Elena, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "The question is, what could be so terrible that you cannot share it with your devoted husband?" Elena felt panic rising in her chest. Victoria had always been perceptive, but this was dangerous territory. "I do not know what you are implying, but I assure you there is nothing to discuss." Victoria circled Elena slowly, like a predator assessing its prey. "Perhaps it is financial troubles? Or maybe an indiscretion of some sort? Though you have always been boringly faithful to Alexander." "Neither," Elena said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. Victoria stopped in front of her again, and for a moment, something almost like sympathy flickered in her cold eyes. "Or perhaps it is something medical. That would explain the weight loss, the fatigue, the careful makeup to hide your pallor. Elena's sharp intake of breath told Victoria everything she needed to know. "Ah," Victoria said softly. "Medical it is, then. Something serious, I would guess, by your reaction." Elena sank into the velvet chair by her dressing table, the pretense suddenly too heavy to maintain. "Please do not say anything to Alexander. Not yet. I need to tell him myself in my own way." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, studying Elena with new interest. "How long do you have?" "6 months, perhaps less." "And you have not told him?" "I cannot find the words. How do you tell someone you love that you are dying? How do you watch their world fall apart because of something you cannot control?" For the first time in the 5 years Elena had known her, Victoria's expression showed something that might have been genuine emotion. "You are planning to tell him, though?" "Yes, soon. I just need to find the right moment, the right words." Victoria moved to the window, looking out at the palace gardens where gardeners were tending to the late autumn roses. "You know, Elena, I have never particularly liked you." Elena blinked in surprise at the blunt admission. "Oh, do not look so shocked. We have always been cordial, but I never approved of Alexander's choice. I thought you were too soft for royal life, too idealistic." Victoria turned back to face her. "But watching you now, carrying this burden alone to protect him, perhaps I underestimated your strength." "I am not strong," Elena whispered. "I am terrified. Strength is not the absence of fear, dear. It is doing what needs to be done, despite the fear." Victoria's voice was surprisingly gentle. "But you cannot protect him from this forever. The longer you wait, the worse it will be when he discovers the truth." Elena nodded, tears threatening to spill over. "I know. I am planning to tell him tonight, after the reception for the Valerian delegation." "Good." Victoria moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it is worth, Elena, Alexander loves you more than life itself. This will destroy him, but he will need to know in order to help you through what comes next." After Victoria left, Elena remained in her chair, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The carefully applied makeup could not hide the truth forever, and Victoria was right. Alexander deserved to know. He deserved the chance to say goodbye, even if it broke both their hearts in the process. The day passed in a blur of official duties and forced smiles. Elena attended the reception for the Valerian ambassadors, stood by Alexander's side as he charmed diplomats and discussed trade agreements. To everyone present, they appeared to be the perfect royal couple, united and strong. But Elena felt like she was watching everything from a great distance, as if she was already beginning to fade from the world. Every laugh, every touch, every shared glance with Alexander felt precious and fragile, moments she was storing up like treasures for the dark days ahead. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Elena knew the time had come. Tonight, she would tell Alexander the truth, and their fairy tale would officially begin its tragic ending. The only question was whether their love would be strong enough to survive the ultimate test. Alexander found her on their private terrace, the same place where she had almost told him the night before. The autumn air was crisp, and Elena had wrapped herself in a cashmere shawl the color of midnight. "There you are," Alexander said, relief evident in his voice. "I have been looking for you." Elena turned to face him, her heart breaking at the sight of his tired but content expression. In a few minutes, she would watch that contentment shatter, and she would be the one holding the hammer. "Alexander," she began, her voice steadier than she felt, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting until I am finished." Something in her tone made him straighten, his diplomat's instincts recognizing the gravity of the moment. "Of course. What is it?" Elena took a deep breath, feeling as though she was about to jump off a cliff into unknown darkness. 3 weeks ago, I received some news from Dr. Richardson. The test results from my recent examinations showed, and with those words, Elena began the conversation that would change everything, not knowing that Victoria was watching from the shadows, her own heart heavy with an unexpected sorrow for the young woman she had never thought she could learn to care about. The words hung in the air between them like shattered glass. Elena watched Alexander's face change as the meaning of her words sank in, saw the exact moment when understanding dawned in his dark eyes. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to a raw, devastating anguish that made her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. "No," Alexander whispered, shaking his head slowly. "No, Elena. There must be some mistake. Dr. Richardson is getting old. Perhaps he misread the results." "There is no mistake, my love." Elena's voice was gentle but firm. "I had them run the tests 3 times. I consulted with specialists in London, in Switzerland. They all confirmed the same thing." Alexander staggered backward as if she had struck him. His hand found the stone railing of the terrace. Gripping it so tightly, his knuckles went white. 6 months? His voice broke on the words. "Perhaps less, but we will make them count, every single day." "No." The word came out as a roar that echoed across the palace gardens. "No, I will not accept this. There must be treatments, experimental procedures. I will call every specialist in Europe, in America. Money is no object, Elena. We will find a way." Elena moved toward him, her heart breaking at the desperation in his voice. "Alexander, please. I have already explored every option. The cancer has spread too far, too quickly." "Then we will try anyway." Alexander's eyes were wild with panic and grief. "We will fight this with everything we have. I will not lose you, Elena. I cannot lose you." She reached for his hands, but he pulled away, pacing the length of the terrace like a caged animal. Elena had known this would be difficult, but seeing Alexander's anguish was worse than any physical pain she had endured. "How long have you known?" Alexander stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression a mixture of hurt and betrayal. "How long have you been carrying this alone?" 3 weeks. 3 weeks? Alexander's voice rose again. "You have known for 3 weeks and said nothing? How could you keep this from me?" "Because I knew you would react exactly like this." Elena's own composure finally cracked, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Because I knew it would destroy you, and I wanted to protect you for as long as possible." "Protect me?" Alexander laughed, but there was no humor in the sound, only bitter anguish. "Protect me from what? From being able to help my wife through the most difficult time of her life? From having the chance to spend every precious moment with her? Elena, you have stolen 3 weeks from us that we can never get back." The accusation hit Elena like a physical blow. She sank into one of the wrought iron chairs, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. "I was trying to spare you the pain." "The pain?" Alexander knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his trembling ones. "Elena, my darling, the pain is not in knowing you are sick. The pain is in the idea of losing you. But keeping this secret does not change what is happening to your body. It only means I have wasted 3 weeks treating this as an ordinary time instead of the gift it is." Elena sobbed then, all the fear and anguish she had been holding inside pouring out in great gasping waves. Alexander pulled her into his arms, and they clung to each other as if their love alone could stop time, could change the cruel hand fate had dealt them. "I am so sorry," Elena whispered against his chest. "I am so sorry, Alexander, for the secret, for being sick, for leaving you." "You have nothing to apologize for," Alexander murmured into her hair, his own tears falling silently. "Nothing except keeping this from me. We are supposed to face everything together, Elena. Everything." They held each other as the night grew deeper. Two people lost in grief and love, trying to find solid ground in a world that had suddenly shifted beneath their feet. The palace around them was quiet. Most of the staff retired for the evening, giving them privacy for their heartbreak. Eventually, Alexander pulled back to look at Elena's face, using his thumbs to gently wipe away her tears. "What do the doctors say? What are the symptoms? Are you in pain?" "Not yet. Not much. There is some fatigue, some nausea, but Alexander, I do not want to spend whatever time I have left in hospitals and treatment centers. I want to live, really live, for as long as I can." Alexander's jaw tightened. "But if there are treatments that might help, even a little, the treatments would make me sicker, not better. They would steal the time I have left and give me nothing but suffering in return." Elena cupped his face in her hands. "Please, my love, I need you to understand. I need you to support this decision." Alexander closed his eyes, the weight of her words settling over him like a shroud. When he opened them again, Elena could see he was trying to be strong for her, even though his world was crumbling. "What do you need from me?" he asked quietly. "I need you to help me live. I need you to help me make memories that will last after. I need you to promise me that when I am gone, you will not stop living. You will find happiness again." "Elena, do not ask me to promise that. I cannot imagine happiness without you." "Then promise me you will try. Promise me you will not become a ghost in this palace, haunting our memories. Promise me you will honor what we had by eventually opening your heart to what you might have." Before Alexander could respond, the sound of footsteps on marble interrupted their moment. Victoria appeared in the doorway leading to the terrace, her face carefully composed, but her eyes alert and knowing. "Forgive the interruption," Victoria said, her voice carrying its usual authority. "But King Marcus has taken a turn for the worse. The physicians are with him now, and they have requested Alexander's immediate presence." Alexander looked torn between duty and his wife's needs. "I cannot leave Elena right now." "Go to your father," Elena said softly, though every fiber of her being wanted to beg him to stay. "He needs you." "This can wait until morning, surely," Alexander protested. Victoria's expression remained neutral, but there was something calculating in her eyes. "I am afraid it cannot. The doctors are quite concerned. They suggest you come now, while he is still able to speak clearly." Elena saw the moment when Alexander realized the implication, that his father might be dying too. The cruel irony of it was not lost on any of them. As Alexander faced the potential loss of his wife, he was also being called to say goodbye to his father. "Go," Elena repeated, squeezing Alexander's hand. "I will be here when you return. I promise." Alexander hesitated, torn between the two most important people in his life. Finally, duty won, as it always did for the royal family. He kissed Elena's forehead, a desperate, lingering touch. "I love you," he whispered fiercely. "We will face this together, Elena, all of it." "I love you too," Elena replied, watching him follow Victoria into the palace. As soon as they were out of earshot, Victoria turned to Alexander with an expression that was almost sympathetic. "I am sorry about Elena, Alexander. Truly sorry." Alexander stopped walking, his grief momentarily replaced by surprise. "You know, I suspected this morning. She confirmed it when I pressed her for details." Victoria's voice was matter-of-fact, businesslike. "It is a tragedy, of course. She is quite young." Alexander stared at his stepmother, appalled by her clinical detachment. "A tragedy? Victoria, my wife is dying, and you speak of it as if you are discussing the weather." Victoria's expression did not change. "Emotional displays will not alter the situation, Alexander. Elena is terminally ill. Your father is dying. These are facts that require practical responses, not hysteria. Practical responses? Alexander's voice was dangerously quiet. My wife just told me she has 6 months to live? And you want me to be practical? I want you to think clearly, Victoria replied coolly, about what this means for the kingdom, for your future responsibilities. Elena's illness is unfortunate, but it does not change the fact that you are the heir to the throne. You will need to consider remarriage eventually, for the good of the succession. Alexander felt something snap inside him. Get out, he said quietly. Alexander, you are being emotional. Get out, Alexander roared, his voice echoing through the marble corridors. How dare you? How dare you stand there and speak of remarriage when my wife is... when she is... He could not finish the sentence. Victoria's calm finally cracked slightly, a flash of irritation crossing her features. You are being unreasonable. I am simply trying to help you see the bigger picture. The bigger picture? Alexander laughed bitterly. The bigger picture is that the woman I love more than life itself is dying, and my stepmother thinks this is an appropriate time to discuss political strategy. Your father is also dying, Alexander. In a matter of hours, you may be king. Personal grief is a luxury you cannot afford. Alexander turned away from her, his shoulders shaking with rage and sorrow. Leave me alone, Victoria. Just leave me alone. Victoria watched him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. As she disappeared around the corner, a small, cold smile played at the corners of her lips. She had always known that Alexander's greatest weakness was his emotional attachment to Elena. Now that attachment would be severed, whether he liked it or not. And when the grief became too much, when the responsibilities of kingship overwhelmed him, Victoria would be there to provide guidance and support. After all, kingdoms needed strong leadership, not broken-hearted romantics. Meanwhile, on the terrace, Elena sat alone in the darkness, listening to the distant sound of Alexander's anguished voice echoing through the palace. She had known that telling him would be like watching him die a little, but hearing his pain made her question whether she had done the right thing. But secrets had a way of poisoning love, and she wanted their remaining time to be built on truth, however painful. Tomorrow, they would begin the difficult process of learning how to say goodbye. Tonight, they would simply try to survive the weight of knowing that forever was not as long as they had believed. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the human drama playing out below, as the kingdom of Aldoria prepared to lose both its future queen and its aging king in one devastating blow. And in the shadows of power, Victoria began to calculate how she might shape the future from the ashes of other people's grief.